was lying in a hospital bed when my mother sent me a text that changed everything. Not a phone call, not a voicemail, a text. Honey, we're so sorry we can't make it tonight. You know how much this weekend means to your brother. The rehearsal dinner is tonight and the venue already has the head count locked in. You're going to be okay. You're strong. I stared at that screen for a long time. The morphine drip was still going. My left leg was in an external fixator, those metal rods drilled through bone to hold everything in place after the accident. The orthopedic surgeon had told me 2 hours earlier that I'd need a second surgery in the morning to determine if they could save full function in my knee, and my mother was worried about a head count. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this story. I'm not someone who drama seeks. I'm a 31-year-old physical therapist from Columbus, Ohio. I go to farmers markets on Sunday mornings. I call my parents every week. I have never once, in my entire adult life, asked them to drop everything for me. Not when I went through my divorce at 27. Not when I lost my job during the hospital restructuring 2 years ago. Not for anything. I was asking now. It was a Thursday evening in late October when the car hit me. I was in the crosswalk. I had the light, the walk signal, everything. A driver ran a red doing about 45 and caught the rear panel of my car as I was pulling into the intersection. My car spun and hit the median. By some miracle, I was conscious the whole time, which honestly might have been worse. I knew something was very wrong with my leg before the paramedics even arrived. I could feel it. They took me to Ohio Health Riverside. My husband Nathan got there within 20 minutes. He'd left work the second I called him from the ambulance. He was holding my hand when they told us about the fractures. 2 in the tibia, 1 in the fibula, ligament involvement, possible nerve damage. The fixator went on in the first surgery that evening. They needed to monitor swelling overnight before they could do anything definitive. Nathan called my parents from the waiting room while I was still in surgery. He told me later that my mother had gasped, asked a few questions, then said she needed to talk to my father and would call back. She called back 40 minutes later. My brother's wedding was that Saturday. The rehearsal dinner was Thursday night, the same night I was in surgery. The wedding itself was 2 days away. My parents lived in Cincinnati, 2 hours south. My brother, Anthony, was getting married in Nashville, a 4-hour drive from them or about a 2-hour flight. They had already driven to Nashville that morning. My mother's explanation, delivered through that text while I was in a hospital bed with metal rods in my leg, was that the rehearsal dinner venue had a locked head count, that flights were expensive last minute, that Anthony needed them, that I had Nathan, as if my husband being present somehow fulfilled the entire category of people who love you showing up. Nathan read the text over my shoulder. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he said, very quietly, "Do you want me to respond for you?" I said no. I put my phone face down on the tray table, and I didn't pick it up again until the next morning. Here's what you need to understand about my brother. Anthony is the youngest of us. I'm 3 years older. And Anthony has always been, without any ambiguity, the center of our family's universe. It was never something that was hidden or denied. It was just the operating reality of our household growing up. Anthony was the athlete, the charmer, the one who made our parents laugh at dinner. I was the one who got good grades and stayed out of trouble, which in our family translated roughly to the one we don't have to worry about. When I was 14, I broke my wrist at a soccer game. My parents were at one of Anthony's travel baseball tournaments 3 hours away. A teammate's mom drove me to urgent care and sat with me while they set it. My parents felt terrible. They sent me a care package. Anthony called to say sorry. I told them all it was fine because I had learned by then that saying it was fine was easier than saying what I actually felt. I spent the next 17 years telling them things were fine. I got into college on a full academic scholarship. Fine. Got my doctorate in physical therapy. Fine. Planned my own wedding because my mother was consumed with helping Anthony through a rough breakup. Fine. Moved to a new city where Nathan got a job opportunity. Left behind all my friends. Fine. Fine, fine. The night in the hospital, lying there with the morphine drip and the fixator and the text on my phone, something in me went very still. Not angry. Not devastated. Just still. Like a part of me that had been white-knuckling something for 31 years finally just let go. The second surgery was Friday morning. Nathan was there. My best friend, Tessa, drove up from Dayton the night before and slept in the waiting room chair. Two of my co-workers sent flowers. My neighbor dropped off food for Nathan. My parents texted. To be fair, they texted several times. Thinking of you. Praying for the surgery. Let us know how it goes. So relieved it went well. We'll come see you as soon as we're back from Nashville. My father called Sunday afternoon, the day after the wedding. He had a warm, booming voice, the kind of voice that always made you feel like everything was okay even when it wasn't. He said, "Sweetheart, we're heading back tomorrow. We'll come straight to Columbus. I'm so sorry we couldn't get there sooner. You know how it is with Anthony's big day." I said, "I know, Dad." And I said it the same way I'd been saying fine for 17 years. They arrived Monday afternoon. My mother walked into my hospital room with a flower arrangement and a tote bag full of things. Good chocolates, a puzzle, the kind of thick socks I liked. She hugged me carefully because of the leg, and she smelled like her perfume. And for a second I felt 11 years old again, and I almost let it go. Almost. My father pulled a chair up close and held my hand and talked about the wedding. How beautiful the venue was. How happy Anthony looked. How his new wife, her name was Kelsey, had danced with her father, and it made the whole room cry. He showed me pictures on his phone, scrolling through them with the easy, unself-conscious pride of a man who had no idea what the pictures meant to the person looking at them. I watched my father scroll through his wedding photos while I sat in a hospital bed with metal in my leg, and I understood something I had been refusing to understand for most of my life. It wasn't malice. That's the part that's almost harder to explain to people. My parents weren't cruel. They weren't calculating. They genuinely, in some deep, unexamined way, had just never thought of me as someone who needed things. I was the capable one, the independent one, the one who handled it. They had made me into a supporting character in my own family, and they'd done it so long and so thoroughly that they didn't even know they were doing it. I let them visit for 2 hours. My mother cried a little when she left, saying how scared she'd been, how relieved I was going to be okay. I hugged her back. I told her I'd call when I was settled at home. I went home Wednesday. Nathan had set up the downstairs bedroom, so I didn't have to do stairs. Tessa brought food twice that week. My co-workers organized a meal train. My physical therapist, the irony was not lost on me being a PT on the other side of it, was kind and patient and professional. My parents called every couple of days, normal check-in calls. How's the pain? How's PT going? Have you tried this supplement? Your father read something about collagen for ligament recovery. Normal. Easy. The same way everything had always been. And every time I hung up, I sat with that stillness. I had started writing things down in the hospital, partly because I had nothing else to do and partly because I needed to put it somewhere. I'm not a journal person normally, but lying there with nothing but time and painkillers and my own thoughts, I had started just typing. Into my phone notes. Stream of consciousness. The wrist at 14. The wedding planning. The move to Columbus. The Thursday text. All of it. It was during one of those late-night typing sessions, about a week after I got home, that I made a decision. My parents were already planning to come for Thanksgiving. It was a few weeks away. The whole family would be there. Anthony and Kelsey, my aunt and uncle from Michigan, a couple of family friends. The big table, the good dishes, the thing my mother did where she acted like Thanksgiving dinner was a military operation. I decided I was going to say something. Not a blow-up. Not a screaming match. I didn't want theater. I wanted them to actually hear me, which meant I needed to be calm and specific and undeniable. So I did what I did when I was preparing for a difficult patient conversation at work. I wrote it out. Every specific thing. The wrist at 14, the wedding planning, the text, the pictures on my father's phone. Not as an attack, as a record. Nathan knew what I was planning. He was the one who talked me through it, actually. He'd suggested I write the specific incidents down rather than speaking generally, because general statements are easier to deflect. Specific ones aren't. He knew my family. He'd watched me do the fine thing for 6 years of our marriage, and he'd never said anything because it wasn't his place. But when I finally told him what I was thinking, he just nodded and said, "It's time." Thanksgiving arrived. My mother cooked the way she always cooked, abundantly, anxiously, with love that expressed itself through food because it was easier than other kinds of expression. The table looked beautiful. Anthony and Kelsey were glowing from the honeymoon. My uncle was telling the same jokes he'd been telling since I was a child. After dinner, during the part where everyone is half asleep on the couch and the football game is on, and nobody wants to be the first one to leave, I asked my parents to come into the kitchen. Just the three of us. My mother immediately looked worried. Is everything okay? Is it your leg? My leg is fine, I said. I want to talk to you about something. I had my phone with me. I pulled up the note I'd written. I started with the wrist. I described it factually. The date, the game, the teammate's mom who sat with me, what I'd said when they called. I watched my mother's face go through several things. Recognition, discomfort. The beginning of a protest that she held back. I moved through the list, calmly. Specifically, I didn't editorialize. I just described what had happened and what I had felt and what I had said fine. Instead, when I got to the text, the venue has the head count locked in, my mother's eyes filled. My father had gone very quiet in a way I hadn't seen before. He wasn't the booming voice version. He was just a man sitting at his daughter's kitchen table looking at his hands. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, I said. I'm telling you because I need you to understand that I have spent 31 years making myself smaller so you wouldn't have to worry about me. And it worked so well that when I was lying in a hospital bed the night before a surgery that could have permanently affected my ability to walk, you sent me a text about a head count. My mother said, Honey, we thought Nathan. I know, I said. That's exactly the problem. Nathan is my husband and I'm grateful for him every day. But Nathan is not my parents. And I needed my parents. The room was very quiet. Through the kitchen doorway, I could hear the football game and my uncle laughing at something. My father looked up from his hands. His eyes were wet. This man who had the biggest, warmest presence of anyone I'd ever known, who could fill a room just by walking into it. He looked, in that moment, genuinely small. He said, I didn't know you felt this way. And I believed him. That was the brutal part. I believed he genuinely didn't know because I had never told him. Because telling him would have meant not being fine, and not being fine had never felt like something I was allowed to be. I know you didn't, I said. That's on both of us. But it can't keep going this way. I told them what I needed. Not a list of demands, just actual presence when things were hard. Not just celebrations. Not just Anthony's milestones. Me, as a person who also had hard things, who also needed her parents to show up. My mother was crying quietly. My father kept nodding slowly, the way people nod when they're trying to absorb something too large to absorb all at once. We sat in that kitchen for almost an hour. It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't a movie moment where everything was fixed. My mother said things that were partly defensive, and I let her say them because she needed to. My father said he was sorry more times than I could count, and each time it sounded more real than the last. At one point my father said, we should have been there. There is no version of that where we made the right call. We should have been there. That was the thing I had needed to hear. Not performed, not rehearsed, just true. We went back out to the living room eventually. Anthony caught my eye from across the room and gave me a questioning look. He could tell something had happened. I just shook my head slightly. Later. He's not a bad person either, my brother. He just grew up knowing he was the son, and none of us ever told him any different. The conversation didn't fix 31 years. I want to be honest about that, because I think sometimes people expect a confrontation to be the ending, when really it's just a different beginning. My mother still defaults to Anthony in ways I notice. My father still sometimes tells stories about Anthony's childhood with more warmth than he tells mine. Old patterns are old patterns. But something is different. Last spring, I had a minor procedure. Nothing serious, routine stuff. But I was going under anesthesia. My parents drove up from Cincinnati the night before. They were there when I woke up. My mother had made a casserole and put it in a bag with ice packs so Nathan wouldn't have to cook that night. My father held my hand in the recovery room and didn't say anything, just sat there. It shouldn't have felt extraordinary. It was ordinary parenting. The thing millions of parents do without thinking. But I'm not going to pretend I didn't cry in the car on the way home. Ugly crying with the passenger seat reclined, and Nathan driving and not saying a word because he knew I have a piece of advice for anyone who recognizes themselves in the story. Not from a place of superiority. God knows I spent 31 years getting it wrong. But here it is. Fine is a complete sentence only when things actually are. When they're not, you're allowed to say so. You're allowed to say, I need you here. You're allowed to say, this hurt me. You're allowed to hand your parents the list of every time you went to urgent care alone and sat in the silence after, and called it strength when really it was just absence. You don't have to blow up your family. You don't have to post anything, go viral, make anyone pay publicly. That's not what I did, and I don't think it's what most people actually need. What you need, what I needed, was just to stop protecting the people who were supposed to be protecting you. The fixator came off in December. My knee is at about 92% function, which my orthopedic surgeon says is excellent, given the severity of the initial fracture. I'm back at work full time. I do my own PT exercises every morning in the living room while Nathan makes coffee. My parents are coming for Christmas this year. My mother has already texted 3 times about the menu. My father called last week just to ask how I was doing. Not about the leg, not about anything specific. Just how was I doing? It's a small thing. It probably sounds like nothing. To me, it sounds like everything. There's a version of this story where I stay quiet, where I go back out to the living room after my parents' visit, tell Nathan it was fine, and add that Thanksgiving to the long list of things I swallowed. I know that version well. I lived it for 31 years. What I've come to understand, not from a book, not from a therapist, not from anything someone told me, is that silence has consequences just as real as any spoken word. Every time I said fine when I didn't mean it, I was making a choice. I thought I was keeping the peace. What I was actually doing was teaching the people around me that I didn't need anything, and they learned that lesson completely. That's not blame. That's just how cause and effect works between people. When you consistently signal that you're okay, the people who love you, even the ones who love you genuinely, will believe you. They'll stop checking. They'll stop asking. And eventually, when you're lying in a hospital bed with metal in your leg, they'll send a text about a head count. Because somewhere along the way you built a version of yourself that apparently didn't require more than that. The hard part isn't being angry at them. The hard part is recognizing your own role in it. What I said to my parents in that kitchen on Thanksgiving, that took something I can only describe as a different kind of strength than I'd used before. My whole life I'd been strong by endurance, by not needing things, by handling it. That's one kind of strength, and I don't want to dismiss it entirely because it kept me functional through a lot of difficult years. But it's also a strength that, used wrong, just protects everyone else from having to show up for you. What I had to learn, slowly, the hard way, lying in a hospital bed with nothing but time and my own thoughts, is that asking for what you need isn't weakness. It's actually the harder thing. Staying quiet is easy. Saying I needed you there and you weren't to someone you love, someone who might cry, someone you might hurt. That requires something different. It requires the willingness to be seen as a person who struggles, not just a person who copes. My father said he didn't know I felt that way. I believed him, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to be known by the people closest to you, really known, not just the competent, capable version they find convenient, and how much of that is on us to allow. Nathan knew. Tessa knew. The people who saw me off script knew something my parents didn't, because I had never let my parents see it. That's not entirely their failure. Some of it was mine. I'm not saying that as self-punishment. I'm saying it because I think it's the only version of this story that's actually useful to anyone who recognizes themselves in it. If the whole lesson is just my parents were bad and then they got better, that's not really a lesson. That's just a sequence of events. The real thing underneath it is this. You cannot outsource the responsibility of being honest about what you need. Not to your circumstances, not to the people who should have done better, not to anyone. The fixator came off. My knee healed. My parents drove up from Cincinnati in the spring just to be there when I woke up from a routine procedure. It was ordinary. It was the most ordinary thing in the world. It felt like proof that ordinary things withheld long enough can mean everything when they finally arrive.